Okay, I'm going to launch into things as people continue to trickle in. So hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining the NBS series on teaching climate. And we're so grateful to have you from all over. Please continue putting in the chat where it is that you're from and one topic that you're passionate about. My name is Abby Litchfield. I'm the community manager at NBS. And before we get started, I wanted to give a quick refresher on some of the purpose behind these sessions. These are moments to help provide materials, inspiration, and approaches that you can use to add more climate into your teaching, and also to provide space for all of you to share your own ideas and approaches with one another in breakout rooms and build some community across the world. So we're excited to have you today. Today's session is focused loosely on the idea of including more policy in the business classroom. This is a topic that, at least at NBS, we've been talking about a lot internally, from all the lobbyists that we saw at COP this year to the ideas of corporate political responsibility kind of coming to the surface. It's definitely something that is important but not always kind of top of mind to include. So today we have a few presentations to kind of spark your ideas for how to do so, but there are plenty of other ways as well, and we're excited to hear from you how you've been integrating some of these ideas. So in terms of how today will run, we have two presentations today, slightly different from our usual format of three. So they'll be a little bit longer with a little bit of extra time for Q&A and discussion. And then we'll do our usual kind of plenary, final reflections, and then into breakouts for the last half hour, and then a final kind of close altogether at the end. So if you have just joined, please share your name, institution, and maybe a sustainability idea you're most passionate about into the chat. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Sathya and Sai to kick us off with the first presentation. Oh, actually, not quite. Sorry. One note that we are going to be recording this session. So if you have any issues with that, please let us know. This will be shared with all the registrants as well as on the NBS site. Now to Sathya and Sai.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all from experts joining from different parts of the globe. What we are going to talk about today is something which has got direct impact on climate policy at different levels. And it's about the ENROADS simulator and how the climate change negotiations, pan out when different stakeholders actually sit across the table and have hands-on changes with respect to their areas of expertise. More importantly, this is built within a course around what we call as a purpose and permanence canvas. So my name is Sathyanarayanan. You can call me Sathya. And so I'm an associate professor of marketing at IFMR Graduate School of Business, Krea University in India. So we are in a place called Sri City in southern India, close to the metropolis of Chennai. Along with me, I have my friend and colleague, Dr. Sai Sridhar, and who is from the Confederation of Indian Industry, one of the largest chamber of commerce and active partner in many of sustainability projects from India. So we are going to take you through, how we proceeded with this new idea of integrating the ENROADS simulators into a marketing program. So the course in which we plugged this particular simulation is a course called, it's a marketing elective course in an MBA program. It is a full-time regular MBA program, that runs for 2 years. In the second year of the course, when students choose their electives from different areas like finance, marketing, and HR. So we picked up this course on product and brand management, a typical course in a marketing specialization area, and which is focused largely on historically on profit making, on how to build a brand towards a financial target. So as you all know, most of the business school programs, the MBA programs in particular, are built around the motive of making profit. And then we also talk about the triple bottom line, people, planet, and then profit. And so in that context, we thought one specialization in business function, which is having a huge impact on how companies respond to the issues of climate change, is the area of marketing, because they are driven by target. And those who are in the marketing function generally have a revenue target focus, which is where sometimes there could be a dilemma or there could be a compromise on how my marketing action is going to have an impact, either positively or negatively, on the environment around us. So we thought, okay, this is one area where we need to bring in the importance of a climate change and the climate policy. And two, why in an MBA program? Because we go by the axiom of catch them young. When we talk about climate change policies, at one level, we talk at the level of the governments, and at a higher level where larger macro policy changes are happening. And then you have in that pyramid, next comes the company level policies. You have companies which are driven by profit motives on how they are going to look at climate change in terms of organizational policy level, on what guides them as mission and vision in terms of their existence. And then third, the input cohort which gets into industry, who are going to play the role of those stakeholders tomorrow or in the business school today. So we thought, okay, it is very important to talk to this particular cohort at the business school level, so that when they get out of the campus and get into the corporate world, so they will be sensitized enough about the impact of that decision they are going to make tomorrow as future managers. So we went by that axiom and thought that this is essential to talk to them about this particular issue of climate change and purpose and permanence. So we basically, from India, we know our father of nation, Mahatma Gandhi, was a proponent of the issues of sustainability, minimalism, and all. 100 years ago, even before it became threatening issues around the world. And there are many Gandhian philosophical ideas which were rooted in terms of how human beings need to have a fair balance with respect to the ecology and the environment in which we live in. And there are a lot of ideas that generated out of Mahatma Gandhi's ideas. So we thought it is important to bring those ideas. Probably, the modern generation, even in India, are not familiar with some of those concepts. They knew Mahatma Gandhi as a freedom fighter or someone who stood for non-violence and won the freedom for India. But not many understand the fact that he was also highly impactful in terms of his ideas on ecology and sustainability. So we thought we will start from that, and then the setting explores about the sustainability development goals and what happens at a different eras in the past and where we are today. So that's the line of thinking we took. And then we built on two important aspects we call as the permanence and purpose canvas. So when we talk about permanence and purpose, I would like to introduce a very interesting Gandhian economist. His name is J.C. Kumarappa, who was one of Mahatma Gandhi's associate, who worked with Mahatma Gandhi a lot, 100 years ago. And he has written a lot of book on ecology. And one of his book is called as The Economy of Permanence, where he talks about different types of economy, like what is a parasitic economy. I'm not going to explain in detail here because that's not the focus here. I'm just trying to set up the base in which this ENROADS simulation was built when we approached it as a climate change intervention in our program. It makes all the most sense, rather than directly taking the students to a simulator program without understanding on which canvas this is going to be impactful. We thought it is better to have a sensitization workshop in which we take them on a journey in explaining some of these Gandhian ideas, starting with J.C. Kumarappa's work, where he talks about different types of economy, like a parasitic economy, where people take a lot from the ecology without contributing anything back, which is having a drastic impact, negative impact on climate change as we talk today. And he also talk about a concept called economy of permanence, where with a non-violent approach, how human beings need to do their economic activities without negatively affecting the environment. So he comes up with a lot of layers around this. And that's what I've listed on your screen, talking about parasitic economy, predatory economy, economy of enterprise, aggregation, and service. And Abby has already shared the ebook, in the mail she has sent to all of you. So that would give you a very interesting perspective on the whole idea of permanence. And then another book, in fact, we have chosen was a book called Deep Purpose by Professor Ranjay Gulati from Harvard Business School. In fact, it was a chance event that I listened to Professor Ranjay in one of the Peter Drucker forum that happens at Vienna, at Austria. So where, in fact, he narrated about this concept called deep purpose, where he dissects and layers what we call as purpose. Okay? Because this is why it is important from, again, a marketing sense is, there are many actions which are taken by the brands, talking about being a good Samaritan in terms of climate change, being a green warrior and all. This purpose layers help us to find out at which level they're actually talking about, whether they put purpose into the core of their activity, what Ranjay calls as deep purpose, like companies like Patagonia, where everything is driven by how I'm going to contributing to the conservation of the environment. Whereas there are companies which what we call in colloquial terms as greenwashing. How companies sometimes do some work and claim that, okay, they are good Samaritans in terms of what do they contribute to the environment. So this purpose layers helps us to find out how we can put different companies in different buckets and then logically discuss what do they mean by their action and where they are exactly, and how much of it is approached with an integrity and with a lot of honesty towards contributing to the planet. And just to name some examples, there are, like, for example, there is a toothpaste brand which proudly uses models who have misaligned teeth and claim that, okay, we are a part of inclusivity, and we even use models who are having misaligned teeth on one end, and then brag that brighter teeth, is what our brand can contribute to you. So from the periphery, it looks good. So that's what we call as purpose as a disguise or purpose on a periphery. But if you go in detail, even having a whiter looking teeth, why it should be actually claimed as a point of difference if it is not medically proven that whiter teeth is much more healthy. So there are enough arguments, food for thought for the students to talk and look at things from a multiple perspective. So which sets the canvas so that En-ROADS ideas could be easily receivable for the students. Otherwise, students think that I'm in a marketing course. My idea is to create a branding program and make my brands profitable. Now, where exactly all these SDGs, climate change and all matters, and how I'm going to impact on how these decisions are going to impact me, there are a lot of question marks for them because they're raw in the campus. And when we set this canvas and then bring in En-ROADS, they're very much receptible. And at the end of what happened at the end of the workshop, probably Sai will be in a position to explain more about En-ROADS, and we'll again revisit all these things at the end of Sai's presentation. So I leave the stage to Sai now.
Thanks, Satya. I don't know whether my video is visible or not. There's some issue with my camera, but I hope my audio is visible, audible here. So Satya always puts me into trouble, connecting two different ends and then making it work is a big challenge for me. Thanks. So I've seen the message. Thank you, Abhi. So what we did is one is single point communication, or the goal that we have set is make the message more simplified so that it is more assimilative and motivates all the participants in the simulation exercise. I would say to go ahead and explore all those features and the content, and in fact go one step forward. I recommend it to go ahead and take the training program that the En-ROADS is offering online. I'm glad the core team from the MIT is here today. They make some remarks on how good this tool is, and I've tried to use it both in the academic context as well as in the business context in other places, and also I keep using it in order to make some points highlighted for the policy work we regularly do here at the CII. Now, the game was set. The idea was to see that communicate one simple thing, because the canvas is about the Gandhian philosophy and having a deep purpose. when we go to the work and we start. Some of them are entrepreneurs in the group also, to be entrepreneurs. So they would be carrying some of the good values that they would like to enrich and then make it as a core purpose when they drive the businesses. So breathe in, breathe out. These are two things that they should remember when they take up the entire program, or the kind of a frame that we were talking about. Anything we consume, we must be in a position to give it back again or contribute something towards regenerating those resources. And that's the underlying idea to provide for them. And it's a very different connection that we would like to make, because all the participants in the program were tech savvy. They know how to navigate through the resources that are available on the internet. And the ENROADS simulator is fairly simple, I would say. When I say simple, when someone gives the right context and a trained facilitator, thanks to Andrew and team who have spent a lot of time in providing this training, we managed to communicate the gist of utility of the tool within 45 to 60 minutes to the group. So what we did is, as suggested in the role-playing simulation game in the ENROADS community, we made it into 6 teams, comprising of 5 to 6 in each of the team. And what I've mentioned also some points there, minimum 3 teams are needed in order to make it effective, because conversations have built up. And the teams could be taking up the roles of a clean tech, climate justice hawks, the conventional energy group, industry and commerce group, fairly reflecting the UNFCC negotiation participants at a larger level. And the facilitator ratio to the team is 1:3. I would suggest, from my experience, it's good. Therefore, Satya and me share the roles on what we do as in order to handle the overall set of teams over there. A lot of groundwork that Satya has put in to make it work and smooth in terms of the execution of the idea. Students' preparation time was given 2 days in advance in order to run through some basic material that revolves around how to use the simulator beforehand and what are those some basic concepts that they need to be aware. And then we did the context setting and the simulator demo at the beginning of the day during the game, where each of the details about 18 levers that are available in the front screen of the ENROADS, we try to provide them how should you use. There's some presentation material that is available to share, to prompt some of those key concepts that they should be aware when they are using this tool and having conversations among themselves. It helps in actually putting together all the keywords that are related to the climate change, education, I would say, basically, into one place, so that when they get stuck with some unknown word or unknown concept, they can go back to the ENROADS website and then learn about it. That's the reason why 2 days of minimum time is needed for them to prepare. We played only 1 round, but it is good to play 3 rounds that would help them get deep into the discussions and come up with some productive, I would say, perspective on the activity that they're doing. The tools, a laptop is essential. We used WhatsApp here in order to ensure that the communication happens smoothly, and we capture the conversations also and further reflect on what is that the group is thinking, how the group is actually looking at these perspectives, and how we can extend it in subsequent discussions in the classroom. And of course, other requirements for any regular classroom. This is the context. And therefore, we did, I would say, the entire activity was done in 8 steps. The first step is provide the required documentation for them. And then we provide the context for the second step includes providing the context for the climate change with an aim to bring the global warming to below 2 degrees centigrade. It's a challenge, basically, that provokes them to see what is that they can think. And now no one is restricting them. There is no textbook. There is no notes for this. All that they need to do is go ahead, discuss among themselves, and then converse with the facilitators over there to see how they can use these levers. And there the learning happens. The more they ask the questions, the more they start exploring the ENROAD levers and the variables that are built into, and there are some of those fixed things that are built into. That's how they start actually going deeper into seeing that if any action that is suggested, taken, or available in the region, how is it impacting the overall objective of reducing the overall attempting to reduce the overall temperature by some degrees. And that's therefore followed by step number 3, demonstrate how to use these levers of the simulator, and then let the teams decide on the actions that they would like to suggest, and then reflect on the simulator to see how they can actually make their case. So each of the groups then therefore use the WhatsApp setting that is available for them and talk to each other. These conversations are primarily negotiations because some of the groups are having conflicting ideas. Some of them are talking about, that I would like to do this, but another group is countering that because it's not in the interest of the group. And therefore, the system dynamics that we are talking about are naturally, I would say, highlighted here among the group. And then they start looking at, okay, I can't do this, I can do this. If I get some help from other group, then I can do it better. Those are the kind of ideas that will prop up, and that's how the group start getting together and then coming up with some consensus. That's how negotiations takes place using the WhatsApp setting there, and then give some time for them to come out and then talk about what is that their view, how they would see this, and then make a case out of it. So discussions, actions, and of course their comments and views from their perspective on how does it impact their business or the product that they have in mind, or how do they see the local policies that are either influencing or promoting the climate initiatives. All those things will come up in the presentation that they make for the group. And of course, by the end of the round 1, what we were able to do as a group collectively is to bring down not to the set target of 2 degrees. Is fairly difficult for the group in the first round. By third round, you can see that they know what levers they should touch, what kind of negotiation that they should do, what kind of what you call impact that it would make on the business and products. That would come into place when we allow them to play multiple rounds. So first round, we were able to hit 2.5. It's fairly good for this group because they are comfortable to use the simulator with 60 minutes and 2 days of preparation. I think it's a good achievement as a team that we made to introduce some of the good features in the ENROADS simulator. Now, once we finished this, we sent out a survey also to see what impact it made on this group. And quite interestingly, I got the 5 points that you can see on the left-hand side. Reduce personal carbon footprint. I have highlighted them also. Discuss with family and friends, discuss with peers. I think all of them said we will do this. But the last 2 are quite interesting one. Learn about impact on job roles and engage in innovation. I think that's a powerful trigger among the students because no matter how many hours we talk, we will not be able to make them perceive this opportunity. The more they see this particular outcome by exploring the impact of the actions that are taken, I think the better it is in the business school community. And the last one that you see is assess impact of climate change in firm value chain. Like again, promotes a good deal of research, good deal of collaboration among the supply chain stakeholders. I think these are real benefits in case if we engage students with this powerful tool. And the impact is going to be very, very good. It's up to the facilitators to navigate or structure the discussions and take the group towards that direction by using it, because it scientifically validates ideas that are prompted and then tells them to see instantly how the impact is translated into either increase in temperature, reduce, or no change. I think to that extent, we have limited the use of ENROADS, though it has got very powerful features built into it, but that triggers the curiosity, and it's a first step in exploring the benefits of looking at the what you call this multi-problem solving approach and the system dynamics that are built into as a model, and opens up variety of areas for the student to start exploring and studying. I think that's something that we managed to do. Any other slide is there from my side that I explain? I think that's the picture. A wonderful group. Satya was able to put them together for a few days and make them work towards achieving what we wanted to actually do. Over to you, Satya.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Oh, Satya, yeah.
Thank you, Sai. And in fact, the proof of the pudding is in eating it. We were also a little skeptical before, launching this intervention. and students were completely clueless. I am here to learn about the tools of brand management and why the professor is actually bringing in something which is unrelated and talking about climate negotiations and all. It was like an unsolved jigsaw initially. So what we actually instructed, or rather advised the student, was to have an open mind and just go through the process and let's see what happened at the end of it. It was more like an experiential exercise for them as well as for us. So at the end of the whole intervention, we thought the jigsaw would get automatically solved. And that did happen. Students, after the sensitization on permanence and purpose, they had some idea about the business is more than just profit. And we also, gave, to take, for example, to take the book like Deep Purpose by Professor Ranjay Gulati, or, J.C. Kumarappa's The Economy of Permanence is just one aspect of it. There are many choices available. It could be a book like A Small is Beautiful by Schumacher, or the book on regeneration by Philip Kotler and Christian Serka. And so there are enough materials available in the market, and contextually, we can actually plug into a sensitization workshop. But these two books actually, in a way, help them to understand the larger aspects of business. And then once they went on to the hands-on exercise, that transition and the end result of the whole negotiation process, what a lecture could have achieved in 10 hours, ENROADS, gave them that experiential learning to realize in themselves that, oh God, this matters a lot. And the decision tomorrow I'm going to make as a marketing or a brand manager is going to have a huge impact unless and until I put my heart and soul into plugging climate conscious into the decision making I'm going to do tomorrow. So that kind of experiential learning actually was absorbed by the students. And in fact, some of them came back to our cabins and then said thanks, because those who were skeptical initially, some of them, they said, no, in fact, it could have been much more. We should have had at least 3-4 rounds. And that kind of transformational change we could see at the end of the workshop. So it's just much more satisfying. And that's what prompted me that this should be shared with a larger, comrades in the academic world. And that's how, we came up with this presentation with the Abby and team. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you
And
so
thank you
much.
all for listening.
Really wonderful, Satya and Sai. And before we go to Q&A, just want to invite Crystal from MIT up to add on from ENROADS perspective. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to this, Abby. This was such an amazing presentation. It's always exciting to see it being used in the classroom, but I love that this was in sort of a class that was not the usual suspect. And from our research, our academic research on the impact of the tool, it really has shows huge gains for folks who don't already opt into something that's climate or sustainability themed. So thank you so much for doing this. I had dropped a link in the chat for a form. So if you're on the call and you are embedding this into your curriculum, we're trying to get a better sense of the difference between maybe professors that use it here and there one-off to where it's actually embedded and is like always used as part of a course. So we would love your feedback on that form. And in addition to co-developing the simulator with Climate Interactive, we founded the Climate Pathways Project at MIT. And this is really to use the interactive simulation to advance evidence-based policy, climate policy among top leaders in both the private sector, but also the public sector. So government, business, civil society. And in the larger scheme of the somewhat 330,000 plus people who have experienced the simulator to date, about 11,000 of them are top leaders. And we find that some of the professors that have traditionally just used this in the classroom with their students become really, really good at using the tool, really, really knowledgeable about it, and also bring another layer of knowledge and expertise from their own field. So we encourage professors to also engage outside of the classroom and bring the simulator to people who are making, either directly forming climate policy or climate action planning in the public or private sector, or people who their job is influential in some way to the shaping of that climate policy or that climate action. So I'm going to drop a couple other links in the chat, including one that we wrote a story about featuring a professor who does just that. In fact, I don't even think she uses it in the classroom anymore. She just uses it outside of the classroom with decision makers. And so if you are, interested in engaging with us in that way and participating in that way. I'll also drop my contact in the chat for you as well. So thanks again, Abby, and thank you for this lovely presentation.
Thank you, Crystal. That's a really helpful addition. So now we can do some Q&A if anyone has questions for Sathya and Sai or Crystal, or also if you want to share something about your own experience using En-ROADS with the whole group, feel free to do so. So yeah, you can unmute or raise hands, whatever you prefer. Yeah, Divya.
First of all, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation and use of En-ROADS. The picture towards the end showed your students. So is it a smaller group of students? Because I teach a course which is for 300 students. So, of course, we do it in different sections, but then it becomes a challenging activity. So how do you manage? Is it a small group? I wanted to know from you first.
Professor Divya, this is a small group. In fact, this is a marketing elective course, and we had a bunch of 25 to 30 students. And so that was, in a way, a manageable cohort, and which also helped us, me and Sai, when we were actually doing the simulation. We were able to go to group in terms of clearing their doubts, in terms of any other perspective they need to have when they look at the negotiation aspect. So in fact, we believe that a cohort of 30 is much more manageable than a larger cohort where that personalized table level handling would be very difficult.
If I want to add something, Satya, I have tried it with a group of 60. That's the max that I'm personally able to handle with the additional facilitator. The bigger groups are better because more ideas will come. I did it in the business environment, not in the classroom environment, which is a little different, and it does create a wonderful environment for coming up with some good ideas. So I think you can go up to 40 to 50 with two facilitators, trained facilitators, on how to make a good intervention and preparation. I think that's my experience. Maybe someone else can add and share their perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, I have run En-ROADS now in many settings, classrooms, undergrad, graduate, in businesses, in community. And the biggest I've done is around 124 people. And it can get challenging. So it's like you have to plan it really well. MIT Sloan actually, through the Climate Ambassadorship Program, has trained a lot of people. They're certified as climate ambassadors, and many times I have helped out my fellow climate ambassadors, and you can do it virtually or in person. So when I did it in Chicago, I had somebody from Rush University who worked in the health sciences, and he and I was able to do the big group. So it really depends on who the audience is, what the purpose is. I've used it for research, collected data. So I've even run it for 45 minutes. Then sometimes I've run it as games in business school right here in Ireland. So it depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what is the level of their knowledge.
Thank you, Anjali. And thanks, Lisa, for the comments in the chat as well. Anyone else have a question or comment they want to share? If not, we can go to our second presentation. I'll invite Bettina to share. So I'll put the presentation back up.
Thank you very much, Abby, and welcome everyone, and hello from Oxford, England. So I currently work at A3 Management Consulting, where I head the sustainability strategy service area. So I help companies reduce emissions, increase, positive impact on biodiversity, or switch to circular economy models. But I'm still affiliated with the University of Oxford, where I taught from very many years. And I still do a bit of teaching around the model UNFCC, which I want to introduce to you here. Now, my slide is just the one slide, and it's fairly straightforward. And the reason why I've done that is because I think the simulation or the game that you may want to set up in your classroom really needs to be close to your experience and background and expertise. And I want you to recognize that it is a game and you set the rules. So you set the parameters in a way that you feel comfortable, and the students still are able to role play a country or an NGO or an industry association, still get this experience of what it's like in someone else's shoes and the pressures that delegates are under in the UNFCCC negotiations. So I went to my first COP in the year 2000, COP 6.5, which was the halfway COP after Den Haag, COP 6 failed. And the COPs, Conference of Parties within the UNFCCC, are really a succession of failures with a few successes, if you think about it that way. And I followed the COP process. I worked for the UNFCCC Secretariat for a number of years, and I used qualitative data from COPs in my PhD, first in my master's, then in my PhD, and later on in my publications, interviewing delegates and doing participant observation. And because I worked for the Secretariat, the UN Climate Secretariat, I saw the negotiation from behind the, like from the back, and even the parts that the delegates wouldn't see. So I knew the kind of pressures that delegates are under, that chairs are under. And I wanted to bring that experience to the classroom, because so many times when you talk to students and say, what do you think should happen with climate change? They say, oh, governments should do that, and governments, and why can't they agree? And why can't they do this? But in fact, every actor in the negotiations has their own set of pressures and their own situation, and they really represent their country. There's no single force that represents the climate. Even the UNFCCC Secretariat doesn't have a mandate like other UN agencies. For example, UNICEF has the mandate to protect children. UNFCCC does not have a mandate. It's a treaty, and the Secretariat helps organize around the treaty. So what I want students to experience here is that they're very closely, they have to act within the boundaries of their portfolio. And my greatest pleasure is when students realize at the end of the negotiations, wow, this is really complicated. It's very complex. It's a political minefield, and actually businesses, and that's why I like teaching in business school, businesses need to act because governments have their hands tied often, and they're not going to be the ones pressing ahead. So in a way, it's interesting to see that it won't come from governments. And I've taught the model UNFCCC in a variety of contexts with master students. I'm part of teaching sort of faculty that teaches these students across Europe in different masters that come together and then negotiate together with over 100 people. I've also run it at a very small scale with 30 students. And this one I'm featuring here is in the business school as part of the MBA program as a one-day, or actually it was just a half-day workshop with the whole MBA cohort. But we divided it into two groups of just over 150 students each. Now, what I want to caution you with is that you need teaching assistant or assistants, as I put here, because everything has to run really smoothly and it's difficult to organize. I mean, if you have 30 students, you can probably manage yourself. It is very hectic because everything has to work smoothly so that the students can really step into these roles and they don't have to there's no pretending. It is now, they are in the room and they are those negotiators. And in fact, that's why I put 2 large rooms, because the first room the lecture theater I use for the presentation on the UNFCCC history and context. And then they get assigned their country or NGO, and then they step into a new room that's set up like the negotiations is, with tables that seat 2 people at a time. And as soon as they enter that room, they're in their role, and they will remain in that role even if they go on a coffee break, or because I want them to talk to each other as if they're those countries. So then what I do is I pick, obviously you can only cover a small group of countries, so you try to pick the big players and some of the smaller ones to make it diverse. And I usually handpick the students for each group so that they're in a group that is very different from their home country. We have very international student bodies. You put someone from the US into Russia, you put someone from Sweden into Sierra Leone, and then we also have NGOs, and those can be environmental NGOs, or they can be business associations, and you give them a bit of time to come up with their position, and with some parameters, they can easily find out about their country, in 5 minutes. They're very capable students, and then come up, guide them with some questions on their country's position. And what I ask them to do is, after 15 minutes, they submit just a 75-word text to the chair, or in my case, it was an administrator. And so these little text tidbits, you send them out on a break at that point so that they can recover from all the information they've been taking in. Take those tidbits of text and put them into a chair's text. And in the negotiations, the co-chairs come from the country groups, and there's also always one developing country and one developed country. So I simulated that. So I said, Canada and Venezuela, each one of you needs to give one of your team members as the chair, and you will be the co-chairs of this negotiation. I am the secretariat. So I sit at the table with the co-chairs, and I give them ideas of how they need to address the delegates and how far they can go. So that is the role I take. So when they come back from their break, they see we put the text up on the wall, the draft text, everything will be in brackets. And then the co-chairs start negotiating one line at a time. And we only gave them 1 hour and a half for this, in this case. In other simulations I've done where I have more time, I've given them a whole workshop. So I've given them 1 workshop to learn about the UNFCCC, 1 workshop to do negotiation, or to prepare, and then 1 final workshop on the reflections. But in the case of the MBA, we did it really quickly, and we really only negotiated for 1 hour and a half, but very intensely. Obviously, you don't get very far in the text, but you can really see that that there's already some challenges, some people pushing back. Once people tune into, oh, if I don't say anything, my country is going to lose out, I need to push my position because they're going to steamroll over me. And they also see that the chairs are, of course, coming from country groups, so they're not completely unbiased. The chairs can call certain countries to the front if there's if they're locking heads, and then it's interesting to see how the other delegates react. Like, why am I not at that table right now? So you get them worked up a bit. You get them really into their roles, and experiencing the pressure, the tension, the disappointment, frustration, and anger that's what that 1.5 hours is. And then you stop it, because they can go on forever, obviously, because we've been doing this, in the UNFCC regime for 29 years. But then you have to give them time for reflection. And obviously you can have them give you feedback, but it's actually this last 30 minutes is really what it all is about, where people then can say, whoa, I didn't realize, carrying a position was so difficult. And I was really disappointed when this country said that, and this is really the important part, is for them to reflect on what it felt like to be a negotiator, and then take it to the business level. What was the role of the lobbyists? So the NGOs have a slightly different role than the government delegates, in that they get to prepare a 1-minute presentation at the beginning and a 1-minute presentation at the end, but they have to be in their NGO groups. So all environmental NGOs get 1 minute, all business NGOs get 1 minute, and so on. Indigenous peoples groups get 1 minute. And you can see, when the business NGOs will have the coal lobby, the wind lobby, the solar lobby, how are they going to come up with a 1-minute speech amongst them? They do not get to speak during the negotiations, but they can have that minute at the end to reflect on the negotiations. So again, what is the role of the lobbyists at the negotiations? They're always present. They can talk in the breaks. You should have breaks, because in the breaks, the lobbyists can talk to the countries and can help the countries come up with their position depending on the economic situation they're in. So you can see that you can have a lot of fun with this. I don't want it to be too prescriptive, because I think you need to build it the way that you feel comfortable with it. But the main point is for the students to feel the pressure that the negotiations are under, and to see why this cannot be the only force in climate change negotiations, and to start looking beyond intergovernmental action for climate change mitigation. Yeah, so I think there's one resource that Abby or Maya can put in the chat, hopefully, because the climate change negotiations are so complex. There are very few people who truly understand what's going on. But Fiona Harvey is one of my favorite journalists. She used to be at the Financial Times and is now at the Guardian, who really understands the negotiations. So I was very happy to see that she has published with a couple of academics last year a piece on the history of the negotiations, and you can definitely lean on that. Yeah. The other thing to recognize, I guess, is over the years, the COP has expanded so massively. Whereas when I first started out in the COP process, everyone kind of knew each other, basically, and we all came together every year. Whereas now, COP28 was so unbelievably large. There's basically now 2 sites, and this never used to be like that, but there are two sites that the COP happens in, and one is the negotiations, that very tightly organized space, and then there's the space that countries can showcase presentations, companies can even showcase their technologies and so on. That is a separate space. It doesn't necessarily influence the negotiations. It's often nowadays even geographically separate. And we used to call that the climate circus, because the negotiators usually are not influenced at all by that. In fact, they don't usually have time to go check out these sessions. So yeah, I can go on, but I think that's the gist of it.
Thank you so much, Bettina. It's great to get behind the curtain a little bit. And I love some of the takeaways you shared. We'll do some Q&A and extra reflection. I also want to read Fernanda's comment. She had to run off to do some teaching, but kind of speaks to what you were just talking about. She says, here we run a COP simulation with our students. It's a role play with multiple stakeholders. We believe this experience is very important as COPs are becoming almost a touristic experience in my perception. We see businesses going there to take photos and showing that they were there. So it's important for students to understand what it's really about. So yeah, kind of along the same lines there.
Yeah, I think it's two separate events happening at the same time. The negotiations still go on as they always have, and they kind of isolate themselves from that activity.
Michelle, yeah, Q&A reflection.
Thanks a lot, Bettina. This was really, really interesting, and I'm always fascinated at people that have also real experiences working on the actual COP negotiations, because I think that gives a very different perspective. I try to do something similar with the students to sort of try to represent different interests of various countries. I was wondering whether you have maybe a sort of a blueprint on how you run the workshops, or apart from the sort of the timeline that you indicated. And I mean, of course, we can probably watch again the video as you explained that in very much detail, but I was wondering whether there was something that you could share, or maybe some documents that you have shared with previous classes that could help us if we want to replicate the exercise in class, because I have a full class on COP and UNFCCC, and I think this would actually work very well in conjunction or complementing, just to make something that is a little bit dry, because in the end, talking about policy sometimes is perceived as the students as a little bit legalistic and maybe a bit dry.
Yeah. I absolutely hear you there. Every time I design it differently. It has to be, there are two reasons. One is because it has to fit the student body, but the other is that the negotiations move on every time. So every time we're actually negotiating something differently. At the moment, it's a bit tricky, to be fair, because the Paris Agreement, obviously 2015, was negotiated, and pretty much everything has been solved except for the Article 6, which is the market mechanism. So you can still do some negotiations around that. I like to keep the negotiations really close to reality in terms of what the delegates are negotiating at the moment. But you don't have to do that either, though. You could just you could negotiate something that's already been negotiated, because it's unlikely the students will know. But I design it fresh every time. So there's no real sort of setup. And in terms of the background, it depends on the student body, how many students, what they're bringing, and what resources you have. And I trust the students to do all their research themselves very, very quickly. Find out about the country, really put yourselves in their shoes. I hardly give them any framework. I just ask them, find out how big is your country? What is the GDP? What are the main challenges? What is the industry? What is the challenge in terms of climate change? Just a few questions around that so that they can form an opinion about their country. So there's no blueprint, because I trust the students will figure that out. And I make them work under enormous amount of pressure to do this. So you have 15 minutes and then you submit 75 words of text, because the delegates are working under enormous amount of pressure themselves. And I want them to feel that. So I don't want to spoon feed them with information. They have to quickly come up to speed. And otherwise you also lose the students, because they'll be like, oh, this is so boring. But if they have to deliver something in 15 minutes, they will need to be on task. So I don't have the answers for you. which I basically.
No, but thanks a lot. This is
That's how
interesting, very interesting. It
that's
seems
how
also that is a relatively low resource in terms of preparation. I mean, of course, we need to prepare, but you don't need a lot of materials to run the workshop, which
Yeah.
I think is always very handy.
It is an enormous amount of work for the host. So you have to make sure you prepare everything really well so it runs smoothly. But then on the day, because I get them to submit the 75 points, I'm the secretariat, I get all the text and then I make it into bullet points. I arrange the text so that it works, put all the brackets. That's very stressful. And that everything works. So it is kind of a stressful exercise, and that's why I recommend you have teaching assistants.
Thank you. So interesting. If anyone else has questions, comments, or your own approaches, Lisa, I'm just seeing you've shared something in the chat. Would you like to speak to it live so we can have it in the recording as well?
Sure. So what I included in here is a friend of mine and we were talking about the controversy of mining the oceans, and he had posted an article on LinkedIn, and we said, hey, we should write an activity about this. So and I will say he did most of the work, created this role play. And just given this audience, I think you might be interested in it. It's all free and there's all instructions in there. And we basically break the students, and you can have more or fewer groups. I have my students do a little research on mining the oceans and the issues before class, because I teach this to undergraduate students. And otherwise, it will probably be just the best arguer wins. He teaches it to executive MBAs, and he does not make them do pre-work. So you can use it either way. But basically, they take on different roles, and they have to debate or like have a little negotiation with each team, with each of the different roles on should we be mining the oceans? What are the concerns? Issues like that. And it is something that the students really enjoy. So if you're interested in it, I just put it out there as a resource, since it sounds like we're all trying to teach sustainability to our students. So it's free, no obligation. If you're interested, take a look at it. If you're not, there's definitely no problem with that at all. So what I think is fabulous about a lot of the sustainability sort of resources and the people teaching it is that people want to make things free. And I think that's really important when you want to try something, and depending on where you are in the world. I know our administration is big time down on how much all the teaching materials cost. So you really have to justify things that the students have to pay for. So, it's great. And that's one of the reasons I just appreciate ENROADS so much, and also the UN presentation so much, because these are things that we can do that the students don't have to pay for, and it can still be just as great of an experience. So thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. And yeah, we were so grateful to everyone who's presented so far in the series for making your knowledge free and available to the rest of the community as well. We appreciate it a lot. Lisa, just noting that in the chat, people weren't able to access the link that you put. So I don't know if there's like a different version, or yeah, if you could try to update that, that would be great. Anyone else have a reflection, a comment, an experience you want to share with the whole group? We can also do breakout rooms, but a lot of people have had to run off to teach today. So big teaching day. So we could also stay in this larger room if people wanted to share more widely.
Yeah, I just had a question to Bettina, and it sort of links to the point that Lisa just made about using sort of similar dynamics for different issues. Is this a model you think could apply well to other sort of major sort of multilateral international negotiations, like something maybe around the sort of biodiversity convention? Or is there specifics around the UNFCCC and the diversity and complexity of that make it particularly sort of well structured for this type of approach?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. I've been to a biodiversity COP as well. They're very similar. So the biodiversity and the climate conventions are sister conventions. They were, of course, assigned in Rio with the desertification convention as well. Those three are the sisters conventions. So they have similar setups. It is a very different vibe. Because climate, of course, has the elephant in the room is energy sector and oil and gas, whereas with biodiversity, you have pharmaceuticals and sort of anyone, the whole IP issues around biodiversity in terms of the business angle of the conventions. But the negotiations are very similar. They have similar structures. The climate COPs have been more established, although they've been running the same number of years as the biodiversity COPs. The climate COPs are definitely more prominent, more established. And because of that, also the one big difference is that the UNFCCC has the IPCC, which predates the convention. And actually, it was because of the IPCC that the UNFCCC was set up. Whereas in biodiversity, they set up a similar body, but it was set up much later, fairly recently, and they modeled it after the IPCC, but they avoided some of the problems that IPCC has. So in that way, it's a different mechanism. So I would think there are these details that are different, but in terms of feeling the pressure of the negotiations, probably the climate one is still, there's a lot more pressure because so much media attention is on what did you negotiate today? Where is your result today? And every time they say, we don't have anything. Whereas biodiversity hasn't had that pressure. And I think that's the kind of fun part of the simulation. But on the other hand, the processes are all very similar. And you could do also oceans, like previous speaker said, or the Arctic Council would be another interesting one, where you have different interests clashing and they try to resolve these issues. I think anything where the students learn, like each country actually comes to the table with their own background and their own, their main purpose is to push their country's position, not necessarily what they're there to solve. And I think that's sort of the eye-opening moment for the students.
Thanks, Bettina. Really helpful. Anyone else have something you want to share? I'm actually just about to put a few links in the chat from NBS. We've done a few content pieces recently around corporate political responsibility and just even, policy mechanisms for the low carbon transition that might be helpful teaching materials too. Sathya,
Thanks, Abby. Bettina, I just have a curious, question. When you work in a multicultural team in terms of these role-playing nations, the objectivity would always be high, assumed to be high, when you are not actually representing a country and role-playing a country. Was there any interesting instance where the perception changed if a particular participant belonged to the home country and is actually negotiating for that country in those role plays?
Yeah, so I always put the groups together so that won't happen, that you are in your home country. Sometimes people have an advantage in that they speak the language of the country so they can read other materials. And sometimes people are from the same region, like South America or something. So there is definitely, you can really see how the student's background plays into their position, because obviously we're all human. and also their professional background. Are they? Is their undergrad in architecture, or is it in science? So that all plays a role. Yes, I have not put them into their own countries. I basically disqualify them from that country, but that would be interesting to see how that would play out.
Thank you, Bettina.
Thanks for the great questions. Yeah, Matthew.
Maybe just to sort of flag an idea to the group, and maybe posed as a question, just considering our two presentations today, have people tried to link that sort of formal sort of simulation of the international processes with En-ROADS as a way of sort of seeing the impact of particular negotiated positions on ultimate temperature outcomes?
Yeah, I was thinking that too, Matthew. Actually, thanks for bringing that up, because it's sort of almost like the yin and yang here, because my part is about how frustrating it is and how there's nothing moving, whereas the other one is how we can make it work. So it does seem like it would fit somehow.
Maybe the specific version of that question is, how does En-ROADS, is it sensitive enough to maybe pick up nuances in negotiation? Maybe that's a question for someone, people who do have that experience with using En-ROADS frequently.
If you allow me to answer, Sridhar Sai here. I remember someone has actually modeled that COP28 negotiations impact on using the En-ROADS tool. I will fetch that link and post it in the group. You should be able to see that. And I think the En-ROADS as a comprehensive tool could be used in order to bring in all the variety of perspectives that happen, especially in the UN negotiations, after the negotiations are done, of course. And also, they do, I remember COP28, before COP28, after 28, there were two links that were shared to see what could happen and what happened actually. So what I have seen is En-ROADS. That's a good tool for anyone to try out by themselves. I'm not saying that you should rely on someone to explain you all that. Once you get trained on it, then you can explore it and try to model the scenarios based on what you perceive is the right way to go about. It empowers every person who is connected to the topic of climate change so much that you can keep looking at what you can do, think, and then immediately, play around, talk to the group. I'm sure Andrew was talking on the day, highlighting that if you have some idea on that, bounce it back to us, and we'll explain you how we can be actually modeled in the En-ROADS. And to that extent that he expressed the support, and I think you should try it out. And since you raised this question, I also wanted to point one important aspect from my experience using En-ROADS. And I'm working on climate initiatives, more from the policy side. I feed a lot of information and perspectives to the big policy inputs that happen from the countryside here, also represent and understand, and also bring out some broader patterns that are emerging in the industries, across the industries in India. So my thought on how do we actually sensitize academic participants about the UNFCC initiatives or the discussions happening, and how the progression is happening, I would say, in the context of climate change, or with the lens of climate change, if you see the business or see the policy, how one would be able to make an impression out of it. For that, if the professor or the subject matter expert is working on one particular domain, I would strongly recommend you should run through En-ROADS training at least once. It's a self-paced program. It really helps you to get to have a feel of the scientific methodology that is very important and structures the thinking very well. I think with 1 or 2 or 3 workshops that you do using the tool, engaging different set of audiences, you should be able to come up with a frame of mind which could be helpful in order to make an impact on the participants. The idea is tool must work and do its work. I think in that sense, getting trained is very important. And even to propose to a group of students that you should try it out, one should get connected. The domain and the tool together should have a combination to make an impact. And therefore, you can then cut out the program effectively. I'm sure others who have tried on that in the ENROADS simulator part and tried it in groups, multiple groups will get this view. Variety of thoughts will come out when we take it to range of groups. Someone would be from electrical business, someone would be from the municipality, someone would be from directly industries ministry, some secretary. There could be some CEO who's looking at, some scientist who's looking at some way of actually working on some. We have so many startups here trying to find out scope for innovation in these. There could be a range of thoughts that would come in, and how do they actually blend into a good idea, a good action at the end of the day is more important in the chosen area. I think in that sense, I would strongly recommend to anyone in this group to run through any structured training program once before you recommend it to the students to play around, because a whole lot of information to be processed and linked to do justice for the group and make an impact. This is my submission to the group. Maybe I'll leave it to you all.
Thanks so much. That's really helpful. Maya, do you want to ask your question out loud? I think it's interesting.
Oh, I was curious about more of the conclusions that students get, but really I think I'm also curious about, fair enough. Yeah, I think Satya just responded to my question. So it sounds like maybe it's sort of a bit of everything, but I am curious, I guess, about what brings about change. And I'm sure it's a bit of everything.
In fact, if you, I'm just recollecting some conversation that we had. See, the students' perspective. In fact, in Satya's group, there was one student who was asking us, Sai, what do you say that the electric vehicle policy that is coming up today is talking about, giving incentives when we buy, and the cost of this vehicle is so much. Do we see any nearby future where we have a host of options available for the consumer in order to switch from the existing two-wheelers? He is talking about a specific segment to electric two-wheelers, and how we should be able to think on it. Can we actually work on this area to figure out the options for us to choose this segment for getting to work? I think that's very micro level impact that this tool was able to make, because the student is therefore actually looking at multiple variables that are visible in the ENROADS simulator. He tried to play around it. He sees the big connection between the climate change, the temperature, and the actions collectively. And there is a tug of war going on a variety of groups. So he sees how the thinking should happen from marketing perspective. He sees what is the opportunity if we actually embark on a journey to innovate on the lines of green, I would say. And because the word there was green, that was popping in their mind. And therefore, then they were looking at, okay, fine. We have a variety of strategies that are available from range of features, functions, and all. I think we have to see it from how do we actually live in an ecosystem where we can give and take, we can live a better life, we can elevate the standard of living. I think these are all beautiful things that will come out of the conversations which happen generally after the game or the tea or the chats that happen. That's where the real impact comes out. I think I'm sure a couple of students already have registered for their PhDs in the upcoming universities that they were looking at. Many of them will remember this when they actually pick up an assignment at workplace. and they fall back and treat to see. I think it's a small example that I could figure out. Maybe it could be many more when we start actually asking people who have done this kind of experiments.
Wonderful. We'll go to Sathya and then Bettina as well.
Thank you, Abby. Another end results that we actually witnessed is since the whole exercise which we did happened around the functions of marketing, right? And the cohort is also specializing in marketing. They were able to think through, the strategies which different brands actually follow in terms of the continuum, the deep purpose continuum. What happens is whether a company or a brand owner is really having a climate consciousness and doing it across the organization. We talk about climate policy at a government, level. And Maya was talking about hitting a boundary, there. But there is also another porous boundary within organizational level, at an organizational policy. What happens is some brands use climate change kind of positioning as a reductionist measure towards mere segmentation, targeting, and positioning. Like, for example, the bunch of people over here, those of us who are conscious about climate change issues. And sometimes some brands see this as a segment which I can cash on. If I'm going to, present a brand sugar-coated with climate change and other stuff and talk about sustainability, which falls under the realm of greenwashing. There are examples, there are companies, which is having two brands, one targeted at people who want fair skin. And there are companies, same company having another brand, which is speaking against the concept of talking about fair skin and all. Both the brands are from the same company. But now, at the end of the sensitization process and the ENROADS kind of intervention, at least students understand those boundaries, and at least they are able to differentiate the kind of strategies which companies do, whether it is consciously a climate change practice or it is a reductionist strategies and just applying it as an STP strategy to get fewer dollars more. So to that extent, the intervention was quite effective.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question you raised there, Maya. And I've been trying to figure that out for the last 20 years or so. And when I first went to the UN, I thought, oh, this is where all the magic happens. It doesn't. It's just people, and they're mostly bureaucrats. It's just glorified bureaucrats. It is fun to work at the UN because it's so diverse. But then maybe it's the delegates. The delegates need to bring the change. Well, they don't. Because they're constrained by their countries. And when you go into the negotiations, really into negotiation, not just to the COP in general, you see it's all about money. It's not about the climate. Very few people actually even talk about the climate. And then now I've been teaching for a long time on climate change. That's why the part of the UNFCCC negotiations also to show students you can actually just read the Paris Agreement. Just read it. It's not that long. And once you get through all the, I try to teach them how to tackle the language so they can get through those parts that are a bit dry. But you can actually see, and in terms of COP 28, for example, just go to the decision, read it for yourself. Don't trust the media on reflecting everything. And then, so now I've gone into industry and I work as a consultant and I help companies decarbonize, but change is not going to come from there either, I'm afraid. I think at the end of the day, what you're doing is actually the most critical thing, is rattling to students, getting them to think about this. Throw some of the IPCC pictures at them about how their lives are going to change when they're old, how the climate, is going to change and how uncomfortable their lives will be. And then they go out into their jobs with that knowledge and just push them as much as you can, because it's individuals really behind all those companies and agencies and governments. And And we see the new generation really does have a different knack on life because they have been growing up in this knowledge. So I think the education component is actually absolutely critical in bringing about change, but it won't be a silver bullet.
That was so inspiring. Thank you, Bettina. Sai,
Yeah, Bettina, I'm glad that I found you today in this meeting. I've been working on three facets. One is with the academia on sensitizing, of course, with the help of people like Satya, who allow me to spend some time with the participants in the classroom environment. I work with the UN, especially on the requisitioning side, the training the requisitioners in following the procurement guidelines, and the transportation units across the peacekeeping operations. For the past 5 years, I've been working with them in training them around variety of areas. One of that is repeatedly that comes out is the sustainability perspective. How do we embed? Because it's the UNFCC, UNEP guys were also there in the program many times. My question for them was always that, are you willing to, replace your assets, which are more environmental friendly? The UN believes in sustainability, but it's very difficult to, when you put the budgets in place, difficult to actually get the environmental friendly assets in place and then run them in different constrained environments. So I think the UNFCC negotiation scenario is very important for anyone to understand the challenges, what we aspire, and what can be done within the constraints in any country at the national level or at the business level too, I would say. Because one of those experiences that I had when we were working with a company which is actually creating new generation, I would say, environmental friendly. I didn't want to mention the product there, but I can tell you the equipment. And the employees of the company were not aware of what it actually can do in the market. They were saying, our company is working on a product which we don't think is usable by any one of the persons in the geography there where we live. We don't see a connection where it can actually make and it can win the competition. So they were not aware at the operational level, at the production level, at the distribution, supply chain, marketing level, that how this product can succeed in the market. And in fact, the company was preparing the product for other markets, not for the Indian market. It took some time for them to understand how valuable the element of sustainability can become in design of a product, in design of overall approach towards marketing a product, and also so important in order to highlight your voice in the UNFCC. You said second portion where you showcase the achievements of a country. I've been asked to consolidate some of the initiatives, and we go to the industry to ask what you have done. We get variety of actions. And one of the simplest actions that I found everywhere is planting trees and a carbon sink creation. And immediately a question comes back to us is, hey, you're talking about carbon credits. Can you tell us, MSME? We have no idea about what it is. Where are we going to head? And therefore, it opens up a completely different perspective and a challenge to associations like us to see how quickly we can disseminate this information, because this change is going to be there. We cannot ignore climate change as a key element, either at the policy level, at the business level, at the product level, because consumer is becoming more and more aware. I think every individual is going to be more sensitive going forward when this education goes to the schools. The awareness increases, and the kind of work that you are doing in promoting this education is very, very important. In that sense, the UN work that is happening and the COP28, however the person sees it, is important to keep it in limelight. And people like you who are actually trying to do whatever that you can do from the first-hand experience that you gained, taking it to multiple audiences is important. These efforts should continue to go on. I'm actually finding very difficult to gather more facilitators who can seriously study this subject, use variety of approaches to communicate and spread the awareness. It's a tough call, but we need to find some ways to do it easily too.
Thanks so much for all of this rich discussion. We'll go to you as well, Sathya, to just keep it going, but quickly want to mention that we do have one more session planned in April. It's going to be about the climate literacy training that's been mentioned many times throughout the series so far by Petra. We'll have her kind of speak to it and people from other places around the world who've used it as well. And yeah, we do hope to see you there. Always reach out with questions or anything like that. But Sathya, continue as well, just because people are starting to drop.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. One final thought I thought I can leave it with you, which I reserved it till the end. We started the sensitization canvas right from the Gandhian ideas about ecology. It's not, being an Indian is just a coincidence, not just because Mahatma Gandhi came from India and we pick it up. There is also a larger logic to it because some of those ideas were talked in the era of 1930s, 1920s and 1940s, almost 190 and 80 years ago. Some of the crystal balls which, happened in those areas have become a reality now in terms of disastrous effect on the environment. Now, how it makes sense to talk about bringing those ideas now is because even now, still some people are in denial. What is going to happen 100 years from now in terms of climate change, what is going to happen at, say, 2130 or 2120. So when we talk about a futuristic world that we're going to live for our children, there are segments which are in denial about it, talking about conspiracy theories and all. And that is where these discussions or the ideas that were spoken by people like J.C. Kumarappa or Mahatma Gandhi in 1930s and 1940s, it makes a lot of sense. The kind of future they talked about is a reality which we are facing now. And the kind of future which we are talking about probably going to be a reality unless we act upon quickly on climate change issues. Thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Really wonderful. And thanks everyone for sticking around and for joining and for sharing your own perspectives and engaging in the chat. We appreciate you all and everything that you bring. So thanks. We'll see you next time, and materials will follow as well as recordings.
Thank you.
Thanks, Abby, for organizing this. Very useful.
Thank you, Abby and Maya.
Yeah.
See you all.
Thanks, Sathya.